This is Tech Me As I Am, a video series and podcast where self-love is shaking up the status quo of corporate America. We're diving into authentic stories that are creating space for you to feel seen, be vulnerable, and succeed working in the everyday. So let's be real, let's be different, and let's get courageous, y'all.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Merwin. I'm the Global Vice President of LinkedIn Sales Solutions, and I'm excited to join Brittany for a conversation on Tech Me As I Am, the topic of authenticity and vulnerability in leadership.
All right, we are going to kick things off now. The vulnerability advantage, future-proofing organizations with authentic leaders. And what other than Alyssa Merwin to help us kick this off with authentic leadership? Alyssa, just for a brief intro of some of the things that she's doing. She's the Global Vice President of the LinkedIn Sales Solutions, one of the company's fastest growing lines of business, obviously. In her role, she leads the global sales organization to help companies around the world leverage Sales Navigator to engage with LinkedIn's 1 billion members. And with more than 20 years of experience in the sales industry, Alyssa has a proven track record of growing businesses and leading high-performing teams. Since joining LinkedIn, she's held numerous leadership positions across talent solutions, sales solutions, and most recently served as VP of Sales Solutions for North America. But outside of LinkedIn, Alyssa is also a member of the Sales Impact Academy Advisory Board, an investor and advisor to the Black Star Fund, and an investor in Stage 2 Capital. Alyssa, I am so excited to have you here as we talk about the vulnerability advantage and what that looks like in leadership today. So thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Thanks for having me and looking forward to a fun conversation.
Yes. So I just want to give a little bit of a preface in terms of how I met Alyssa. And one of the biggest things that made me just gravitate to her in general was the fact that she loved Brené Brown. And when she said that, I was just like, that's my girl right there. Because Brené Brown changed my life. And that just instantly allowed us to hit it off. And I just felt the love. I just felt appreciated, felt seen. And, you know, when you think about love, this is something that I've told myself, love is not found, it's realized. And I realized the love that you had for yourself as I was learning to love myself. And, you know, that's why we're here today. So first I want to ask you, when it comes to vulnerability, what does vulnerability mean to you, and personally and professionally?
You know, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my evolution as a leader. And vulnerability has been probably the most important part of that evolution. And as I think about what that means, I think it actually just means authenticity and getting really comfortable being me and being comfortable not trying to be someone else or who I think I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to show up. And, you know, that is a journey, and we can talk about that journey. But I think it's being authentic and really like letting go of all the expectations and not worrying so much about what everyone thinks. And I think that the vulnerability part is like I'm okay to not be perfect all the time, because I'm not. And we need to be okay with that.
You can. And I think when we get in our minds about being perfect is when we start not being perfect even more. You know, the perfectionism, like the expectation the world tries to have and put on us, especially with social media and things like that, it really does make it where, you know, people feel the need to have to be something that they're not. And I think when you do figure out how to just be you, you really do show up in the most authentic way and you show up in the best way. I wanted to ask you about something specifically. Authenticity is a popular leadership concept, but can feel very vague. Can you share specific things that you think leaders can take today to be more vulnerable with their teams, and things maybe you're even doing today as well?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with a story. So I've been leading teams for quite a while now, and I was in a leadership role where I felt like things were going really well. And I mean, they were from a bunch of perspectives. But I got connected to a coach who he sort of turned the mirror, like held up a mirror to me and helped me sort of appreciate that as even though things on the surface were going quite well, I think his observation or experience of me was that I was sort of guarded in a way that I don't think I realized I was guarded. And so we started to do some work together, and then we ended up bringing my leadership team together and created some space for us to have some really honest conversations. And part of the honest conversation was my asking those 20 leaders in front of each other to give me feedback on what was going well, but more importantly, what their observations and experiences had been. And so I started to hear some things that stung a little bit, things that I guess I hadn't appreciated how I was showing up and what their experience was. And maybe one of the most interesting things is we did a Myers-Briggs test for all of us. And he, as part of that feedback session, he said, let's have everyone go around in the room and sort of guess what your personality is. And to a person, of the 20 leaders that were in that room giving me feedback, there's one that is, you're either like thinking or feeling, and every one of them thought I was a thinking leader. And I actually couldn't be more of a feeling leader. I'm like so far at the end of the spectrum. And what I realized is that I put so much energy and thought into how do I create a great experience and make people feel cared for, and yet there were things that I was doing as a leader that actually completely sort of masked all of that intent. And so I had to really step back and figure out, like, what was I doing in the way that I was communicating and leading the teams that they were seeing a sort of like harsher side of me than actually what was like a very warm and caring side. And so that was like a real turning moment in my journey of figuring out, well, what kind of mask am I putting on that's making me show up in a way that is so antithetical to actually who I am at the core as a leader.
And so when you were thinking about that and getting that feedback, what kind of things did you do to try to help with unpacking the things you were doing and showing up better? What kind of things did you implement?
I mean, first of all, this is all a journey, right? Like every conversation, every time you have a new team member, I think you're always sort of adjusting, adapting, and thinking about, how am I showing up? I think part of it was figuring out, am I being as authentic? If I were being really authentic, then I think people would have seen the feeling side of me. Right. But I must be, overcompensating and trying to act like what I thought a leader should be that was, again, giving an impression that was so different than how I actually felt about the team and about the relationships. And so I think that was a big part, is just really thinking about how do I peel back all that stuff I'm carrying and trying to pretend to be the, corporate leader and instead be goofy and have fun and, maybe I use a curse word every now and then, just the things that are actually me. And caring a little bit less about always saying the exact right thing. I definitely screw up plenty of times and I have to apologize and, just being okay, really being human first. And I think but it is a journey and I always have to sort of check it and make sure, am I being me versus who I think I'm supposed to be?
Yeah, I really love that you said that. Checking in with yourself and realizing, am I being me? Am I being me first? And then when I show up, are people receiving that? Are they able to feel that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think this goes without saying, but so much of this is, if you really care about the people you work with, you invest deeply in the relationships and getting to know them and sharing, and you spend the time, so it's not a transactional relationship. And that may have been one of the other big realizations, is that, I like to move fast, I like to get things done, I like to have, high-performing teams, and sometimes that you kind of skip over the human connection part if you move too quickly. And so starting to slow down a little bit and making sure that we have, we're connected and we enjoy the work we're doing and we work well and all of those things that are foundational to actually doing great work. And I think that was the big turning point.
I love that. I love that you said that. And I think there's a healthy balance in being able to get the job done and also being the human as we are at work and at home and everywhere else. So I love that you said that. I know we had talked a little bit about being on a self-love journey. I would love to learn a little bit more about how long your journey has been and What does that look like in terms of being able to show up as such an authentic leader? Because you do such a great job at it.
I mean, I think self-love is a lifelong journey, isn't it?
It definitely is.
I mean, I spent plenty of time being not comfortable in my own skin. Plenty of time. And, we're our own worst critics. And so I think as a leader, it's really important, though, to start to try to focus less on yourself and being super critical. I mean, always be on a journey of growth and in being better, but focusing more on how can I show up in a way that is like serving the team and being the best I can be to help lift up others. And I think that's a really important part of the self-love is like I can't do that well if I'm always being critical of myself and worrying, being so self-focused.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it, but I also am on a continuous journey of learning, and I read books, and I've just done a lot of work over the years to try to tap into my own confidence and what are my superpowers and unique capabilities, and also how do I continue to grow and learn, because it's I always say we're all works in progress.
We absolutely are always works in progress, and I think as we think about growing and learning, it's making sure we're being mindful about the little steps along the way, and really absorbing, being in spaces with people. I think one of the things I told myself, because I recently had taken a leave of absence, coming back to work, I wanted to be intentional about really having real relationships with people that I work with. And I had said this, in a previous episode, but we spend over 90,000 hours of our lives working, and so how can we come together, and when we are working, we are creating those environments together and really being appreciative so that we can feel good about the work that we do.
Absolutely. I would say, we work, I love working on hard, interesting challenges with great people. That just makes it fun,
Yes.
we need to enjoy the ride, and
Yes.
we're going to do our best work when we're doing it with people that we really can invest in and enjoy being together with.
Absolutely. I do have a question for you. When we were thinking about vulnerability for people that might be more introverts, what is your perspective, I guess, in introverted leaders and still being able to leverage vulnerability? Sometimes it's kind of hard to lean into something you're not used to doing. So do you have any advice for, people that might be introverts that can lean into being, a little more out of their shell?
Well, so first of all, right, the introvert extrovert sort of paradigm is
ambivert too.
Is generally about where you get your energy and
Yes.
what you need to recharge. And so, I would imagine, so I'm on the extreme end of extrovert. I get a ton of energy from being with other people, and that fills my cup, and I don't need a lot of downtime by myself to sort of re-energize. And I think in some cases that can actually be a little overwhelming for people. So I have to also check myself that, my energy and enthusiasm needs to have some range, and I need to be really aware of my audience and who I'm engaging with. And I think that introverts, maybe by nature of many of them that I know, are super, super thoughtful and maybe a bit more intuitive on that. And so I don't know that I would say, I don't know that I would think that vulnerability would show up differently, but I guess if the question is how do you, as a more introverted leader, create space and feel comfortable being more authentic or sharing vulnerability, it's probably finding the right spaces. Maybe it's not on stage, right, to 1,000 people. Maybe it's in quiet moments of connection and conversation, or in forums that feel more comfortable, that are more energizing than draining. And so I think that may be part of what I would advise people to think about as an idea.
I think that's a really great answer, and I love how you kind of created that perspective too, because I think everyone gets their energy from different places, to your point. I'm kind of like an ambivert. I feel like as I'm getting older, I'm liking to do less, but I try to still feel like I'm not getting too old and go out and get my extrovertedness and go and socialize. So I really like that you created that perspective. One of the things that I know that we had talked about a little bit was, being able to wear two hats, right? Being a human and then being a leader. How do you think about managing that? Just being in the role that you're in today.
Well, I think it depends what we're talking about with being human and a leader. So we're talking about work life and making it all work, or more the how to marry the human side of me as I'm showing up with the team. I guess it depends.
So I'm kind of getting at like, is there a way of being too vulnerable maybe, or is there there are times that you have to be a leader and kind of be like, okay, this isn't the time maybe for me to be that way. I'm asking honestly, personally for myself, because as I'm thinking about things, how do you go about being vulnerable in situations maybe you might not be used to being in?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that I've learned is one of the most powerful things that you can do as a leader is be honest about how you're feeling. And that can be really scary, right?
Yeah.
But as leaders, one of the most important things we can do is create connection and be able to be human so that our teams can relate and understand and be along for the journey. And sometimes you need to, in a difficult moment, you need to put on a brave face and you need to be the person that, can chart the path forward and cast a vision. But I often have found, and again, this is more I've been doing the work over the years, that the more honest that I can be about what my experience is and how I feel, the more my team has rallied and been either there to step up with you to solve the problem or being able to also be seen. There was a moment last year for our organization that we were going through a difficult time, and I wasn't exactly sure how I should show up, because on one hand, I could see the writing on the wall and it wasn't looking good, and I felt like I needed to communicate that. On the other hand, I was a little freaked out because at the end of the day, it's my job to deliver, and I was trying to figure out, how open should I be with my team about the concerns that I have. And I had a bit of a crisis of confidence. Like, am I the leader that can lead us through this moment? And so I, tapping back into, the authenticity, I decided I think it will be better for all of us if, rather than putting on the brave face, I actually just share how I'm feeling and that I am going through a moment as a leader. And I don't really know exactly what we need to go do, and I'm not exactly sure how we're going to, figure out how to win. But that's just sort of where I am right now. And when you have amazing leaders and team members around you and you're able to share that kind of authentic feelings and vulnerability, your team will come to support you and figure it out together. And that's what happened. And so I think that was like a really powerful moment, a reminder of, we are human and we are leaders, and it's okay, and we need to show all sides of that.
I love that you said that, because when we think about being able to be vulnerable, I have found so much power in that. When we don't know the answers to something, or we don't know how to show up and be, in a certain situation and navigate it, the thing to fall back on is yourself and the feeling that you're feeling in that moment. And it's hard to do it, because if you haven't practiced doing it, especially being at work, it's hard. But if you've built a team around you and you have a good amount of people that are supporting you too, it feels more comfortable to do that.
It does. And one thing that I think is so important is that we model it as leaders, right? You only can get to that level of connection if you create the space and model. And I had this moment the other day. I was chatting with one of my very important team members and partners, and I realized I haven't actually asked for feedback in a long time. And I said, we probably need to create some space, because it's easy to sort of like assume everything's great, but people aren't often going to tap you on the shoulder, especially if you are the leader of an organization, and be like, hey, I'm going to give you some feedback. So you've got to really remember that feedback goes both ways. And again, if we go back to we're all works in progress, I need to also figure out how I can show up better, and things that I may be doing that are not landing, or could, and that model, like, first of all, that's helpful for me, and I need to do that. And it's also modeling the behavior that I'd want all of the leaders in my organization to do, because if I'm not doing it, then, people wouldn't know that that's an expectation. But that's the kind of environment and organization that I want, where we can be really honest with each other and constructive to help all of us grow and get better.
Absolutely. And I think it's a trickle-down effect. When you have great people around you, everyone's modeling that. You just create that ecosystem, and everyone's learning. Like, I can honestly tell you, myself working in the organization I work in, it has changed my life working at LinkedIn. It has. And the reason being is because, growing up, I didn't have access to a therapist. I didn't have access to, parents that had the tools. And so you get a level of exposure to people who have had access to things and really being able to nurture and learn. And so the organization that you've created, Alyssa, is a representation of you. So I truly do appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I truly do. When you're thinking about recognizing people at different levels on their journey, and you're trying to have conversations and meet people where they are, right? This is something that I've been challenged with myself, is as I've gone on my journey, you recognize, people are in different journeys for themselves. Their self-love journeys are, ongoing, they never end. But sometimes, it can kind of feel like, they might not be in an area where they can recognize you or receive you. And I've had a lot of difficulty sometimes being in situations like that myself. So I'm curious to just hear your perspective on that and how maybe you navigate that.
Yeah, there's two parts of this that you just reminded me of as you were asking that question. I had a moment as a leader about 5 years ago where we created some spaces where we called it removing your mask. And we wanted to create an organization where people really felt like they could be themselves, their full selves, and be able to share things that maybe you don't typically share at work, so that we could all understand what we're going through and better support each other. And I hosted them across our different offices, and I attended every one. And there were individual contributors, there were leaders, and the things that people shared and the weight of what people were carrying into work every day blew my mind. And it was a moment, it was an awakening for me. It's like you know that people come from different circumstances and are going through different struggles, and you sort of appreciate that. But when you hear the stories and you create space for people to share, it totally changed how I thought about every single person that walks into the proverbial office, whether it's hybrid or in person, is carrying so much outside of just showing up to do their job. And we need to understand, the whole person, to the extent that they're up for sharing, so that we can meet them where they are. Because I think it's really hard to do that if you just sort of take it at face value. You're here to do a job, and I'm here to support you. That is that is so surface. Our job is to create a space where people can thrive, and that was a real awakening for me as a leader, and it has completely changed how I think about creating inclusive cultures and figuring out how we support people. That's part one. The second part is people are on all stages of the journey of self-love, of acceptance, of challenges, and sometimes you need to be really direct with someone, and you need to just say the thing, and they're at a level that they just need to take it, and you're going to work through it. And there are other times you need to, put on your kid gloves and have a more gentle and, softer conversation. So I think as with anything, there's range. And I try to be really thoughtful about where is this person. If they're junior, in earlier career, I'm going to probably have a much softer, more supportive conversation, right? But also it could be someone senior who's going through a lot of hard stuff, and you also need to be gentler. And so I think it's just figuring out, what does this person need to hear, or how can I support them based on where they are right now? And that can change too.
I love your answer, and I think that just goes to show too, the environments and the rooms that you're in, you always create a space. I remember when we had an event, and we had a roundtable discussion about diversity and inclusion, and it blew my mind. I mean, we were in there crying.
We were crying.
But it just felt so good to be in a room where you could cry with a leader and feel that. And everyone in that room, it just was a very eye-opening moment, and I live for moments like that. And the fact that you create space in the world, in the rooms that you enter, I think, again, that model behavior, being able to have psychological safety, because when you are vulnerable, you also allow people to be comfortable being vulnerable themselves. And that's how you build trust, and that's how you build rapport, and that's what makes people want to, go in the trenches with you and make sure any tasks and things like that get done. So I just want to say I appreciate you for that. So we're coming up on time. I wanted to do a couple quick rapid fire questions. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is a book that you are reading or a go-to book that you use whenever you're feeling you need to kind of revitalize yourself?
Well, I'm going to share one that I got this week as a gift. That I don't know if it counts as a book, but everyone says it's so important to, spend moments thinking about gratitude, and I agree, but I've been really not great at following through. But I received the most beautiful gift this week from a member of my team, and it's a gratitude journal, and it's perfect for me because it's quick. There are a couple of morning prompts and there are a couple of evening prompts, and so I had a big moment yesterday, and I was a little stressed about it, and I have a little bit of anxiety. And in the morning, I woke up and I wrote down the 3 things that the prompt asked. It was how are you going to be courageous today? I think was the prompt, and it was such a great moment to just sort of reflect and give myself a little bit of self-love and appreciation for what was going to be a great experience. And then in the evening, coming back and being able to reflect and appreciate what went super well, and one of the things that I was so grateful for was just this incredible team. So that, I don't know if that counts as a book, but it's been a great gift.
It's definitely going to count for sure, because journaling, I think, kind of helps with doing those things and getting through emotions as well, right? And gratitude is something that also helps a lot too, leaning on gratitude. I guess my next question to you for rapid fire is, what is your go-to song of choice when you need to get in the headspace of, being the leader that you are today?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Anything Beyonce.
Anything. It can be Beyonce.
Anything Taylor Swift. Is that too trendy? I don't know. But those are like on constant rotation.
Repeat? Okay, so did you go to the Renaissance Beyonce concert?
I have not. I'm not a crowd person. Okay. But I'm repping a lot of silver these days.
Okay. I'll take it. And then last but not least, if you could say anything to the audience in terms of, a takeaway when it comes to vulnerability, what's something that comes first to mind and how to lean more into that?
I think my best advice is to not filter yourself so much, and just the more I think we all show up as our authentic selves and not worry so much about how others might perceive us, I think the more human, the more relatable, the better relationships we can build. And I think if we all did that a little bit more, everything would just be a little bit easier.
I would agree. I would 100% agree. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa. I appreciate your time. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us today in the Tech Me As I Am Vulnerability Advantage. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brittany.